Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
We are rolling into this Friday morning. It is 6:07 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news for you. You're listening to me, your Friday gal, Patrice Onwuka. I'm in for Larry today, and right here in the co-pilot seat is Hans von Spakovsky of the Heritage Foundation. You head up a number of electoral constitutional efforts at the Heritage Foundation. Hans, so good to have you on today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be sitting in the WMAL studio instead of calling in remotely as a guest.
All right, well, at 7:05, we've got the Maine State Representative, Laurel Libby. She's going to discuss the battle over protecting women's sports. Excuse me, at 7:35, Mike Litteris from the National Park Service is here to talk about the peak cherry blossom bloom. And at 8:05, Alana Goodman of the Washington Free Beacon will give us the latest on the Epstein files, whether they were released and what was in them. All right, so Hans, let's kick off. We talked a lot about immigration last hour, the efforts to thwart the immigration policies of the Trump administration. Folks should go to our podcast and download that must-listen segment that you really broke down federal policy versus the norms. Let's head over now to the federal government resizing, right-sizing, or downsizing, as you would call it. We do have an update now on an issue that will affect a lot of WMAL listeners. A judge has ordered the rescission of OPM's memos directing agencies, federal agencies, to fire probationary employees. You know, as we know, there has been a directive that federal agencies would let go their probationary employees. This is part of the downsizing of government. And we just now have, as of yesterday, a federal judge, U.S. District Judge William Alsup, saying no, this is pretty much bringing a halt to that order. Give us some background, Hans, and what do you think this means or what's going to happen going forward?
Well, you know, the center of the federal government is headquartered in where? The District of Columbia. And where is this judge? The Northern District of California in San Francisco. So you can be sitting there wondering, why in the world would these federal employee unions file a case in San Francisco instead of in D.C.? Mm-hmm. Well, because William Alsup is a Democratic nominee judge and is known for being basically a liberal ideologue. Now, he says in this case that the federal government, OPM, had no statutory authority to fire all of these all of these probationary employees. But he doesn't explain that at all. And what people need to understand is when you're a probationary employee, none of the civil service rules apply to you. You're on probation. You're a new employee. And during that time period, the federal government can fire you for no reason or any reason. It's the judge who is acting outside of the law. And, you know, he says OPM doesn't have the power to fire these folks. OPM didn't fire these folks. They sent a directive to these federal agencies who do have the power to fire these probationary employees, and it's the federal agencies that took that action. This is just another nutty decision from a liberal federal judge that I have no doubt will eventually get overturned.
Well, I mean, I think that's the next step, right? This is a federal judge, and so this would be the Trump administration would appeal this decision. Do you think it would get as high up as the Supreme Court, or do you believe that it would be stopped along the way?
Well, the problem, of course, in California, and one of the reasons that these groups, look, what they did was called venue shopping.
Yes.
They were venue shopping. And not only did they pick one of the most liberal federal district court judges in the country, who are they going to appeal it to? The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is, Patrice, I think they hold the record as being the most overturned appeals court in the country. So he may not get any satisfaction, the Trump folks may not get any satisfaction from the Ninth Circuit. But, yeah, I think this may be another case that ends up at the Supreme Court, where we're going to have a lot of cases over the power of the president to actually be the CEO of the executive branch or not.
Well, that's what this speaks to. This is the larger
Yes.
issue. The left right now, they have no power in Washington. They have no leverage. They've lost the House, the Senate, the presidency, and a number of governorships and state legislatures. So right now, the best that they can do is sue. And there a lot of these federal unions representing federal workers are driving these lawsuits. But they're fully supported by the left, which sees that their only avenue to push back against the executive power being used right now is through lawsuits that they know themselves, Hans. I think they know themselves will be overturned. I think we saw some really great wins this week and last week where some of these efforts, for example, the buyout, that was overturned in federal court. These federal judges have said, no, the president has every right to do this. And by the way, I'm pretty sure a lot of federal workers wish they had taken the buyout now that they're seeing there are a number of layoffs coming up ahead.
Yeah, and look, I keep hearing all these reports about all these people upset about this in the metropolitan area around D.C. Look, the federal government's got 2.25 million employees, and the number of people so far fired is actually relatively small. And the federal government, I'm sorry to say, is just too big. It wastes too much money. There are too many people employed by it. There are more people employed in the federal government. The population is larger than some states when you consider all the federal contractors also. And this is something that is needed and has been needed for a long time.
One of the lawyers representing the challengers to the removal of probationary employees is Danielle Leonard. And apparently she said that the template the OPM used to require agencies to remove these probationary employees falsely told them they were being terminated for performance. She called the action, quote, wholesale fraud on the federal workforce. They knew that was not true. That is factual. That is the factual issue at the heart of the case. I have heard that. I've heard stories reported, Hans, where people who've been let go it was for not meeting probationary expectations. Will that be the meat of the heart of the case, or really is it just the fact that the president and that the administration has the right to lay off or remove these workers, regardless of what the reason is?
What that lawyer said is irrelevant. During your probationary period, as I said, you're an at-will employee. The civil service rules haven't applied yet, so that they can fire all these probationary employees for, like I said, no reason whatsoever except you're fired. So that is just irrelevant. But what is irrelevant is Congress trying to restrict the power of the president to actually be the head of the executive branch and to tell him that you can't fire the people who work for you. That is not the way the executive branch works. That's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says the president's the head of the executive branch, and Congress can't restrict his ability to fire people any more than the president could come in and say, oh, you're congressional staffers? I'm going to restrict your ability, Mr. Senator, to fire the people who work for you.
Well, listen, we see this in the private sector where at-will employees can be fired for any reason.
Right.
Why shouldn't that expectation be set for the federal government? We're going to talk about this and more, but stay with us. It's 6:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news.
DEI. Hans von Spakovsky. DEI went from a little-known collegiate academic idea to, frankly, one of the things that we hate in society, which is just discrimination dressed up in a new decade of clothing. And we have seen the President Trump really take on DEI, try to scrub it from the federal agencies and the federal workforce, and now he's training his fire on the Department of Education, trying to root out this incendiary, sinister mentality that the left has tried to use to brainwash our children. Now, this caught my eye yesterday, which is that the Department of Education under President Trump is now saying, okay, we're going to have directives, but we know that the educators, the teachers unions, they're going to try to go around that. They're going to, ignore these directive orders. So we are soliciting from the people, the students, the parents, the good teachers out there who don't support this stuff. We are going to create a way for you to call out what you're seeing, and call out the DEI policies still being enacted in your local schools. As of Thursday, parents, teachers, students, and communities can submit reports of sex and race-based discrimination in K through 12 education. Hans, you focused on civil rights when you worked for the DOJ under the Bush administration. What does this mean to you? What does this tell you?
This is great. Look, let's talk about what does DEI really mean. It actually stands for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination. And
oh, I love that.
And what DEI teaches is that discrimination is good and beneficial if the right people are discriminated against and the right people are discriminated in favor of. I mean, that's in essence what it's all about. That kind of discrimination is illegal. It's a violation of the Civil Rights Act, and the Department of Education has an entire office, an Office of Civil Rights, whose job it is to investigate school systems, colleges, K through 12 schools. Anybody who receives federal funds, they have the right to investigate, make sure they're complying with civil rights laws, and this is a great way of them getting information, particularly on local schools that continue to discriminate. So I think, boy, this is long overdue.
Well, and let's pair this with what we talked about earlier, where the AGs in a number of states are going to take up the mantle to ensure that, they're going to protect women's sports at the local level. I think this tip line hopefully can also be the information sent to the states, where the state AGs can also provide greater oversight over the schools in their jurisdiction. Yeah,
and this is really important, and it's an important change. Because you'll recall, Patrice, that when the Supreme Court ruled remember they had a lawsuit went all the way to the Supreme Court against Harvard and the University of North Carolina, in which the Supreme Court said you cannot discriminate on the basis of race in your college admissions. And what happened? President Biden came out and basically told colleges and universities across the country to ignore that ruling, and both the Justice Department and the Department of Education refused to engage in any investigations of colleges that continued to discriminate. That has now all changed, and that benefits all Americans.
It absolutely does. I looked at some of the early results over the past year or so of admissions at some of these elite colleges after the Supreme Court case you mentioned. And it's interesting. It's been mixed. In some schools where they really heavily depended on discriminating against white and Asian students, then you saw a drop in the number of black students that were enrolled. But at schools where, they actually took a more balanced and nuanced approach and didn't really use race as a deciding factor, the numbers of black students, Hispanic students really didn't drop precipitously. It was really kind of even and consistent. And, listen, this speaks to the larger issue about rooting out DEI across our workforce, across our education force, across our workforce. Now, it's not surprising then that the teachers' unions, not all the teachers, but the teachers' unions hate this. They are suing. Randy Weingarten, she is the head of the American Federation of Teachers, is suing the Department of Education over over the DEI executive order. She wants to continue to discriminate against different students. Is she going to win this one, Hans?
No, she can't win it. It's what she wants, what she's suing about, and what she's trying to basically reinstitute and keep is she wants to say that it's okay to violate the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I'm sorry, but not only is she legally wrong, but she is morally wrong. That kind of discrimination is something that Americans today will not tolerate. And if you look at the polling on this, for example, on college admissions, a majority of all Americans say there should be no discrimination on the basis of race. And it doesn't matter what political party they affiliate with, and it doesn't matter what their race or ethnicity is. Parents want their kids judged on their abilities, not their skin color.
Amen. Amen. I think that was an idea taken from from historical documents, the Constitution, the Bible, Dr. Martin Luther King's speech. I mean, wherever you want to pull your source is a universal principle. And just to wrap this up, Linda McMahon, who has been nominated to head the Department of Education, she's going to have her final vote in the Senate. It looks like early next week on Monday, but she did advance through the Education Committee this week. So we're looking forward to her really tearing things up at the Department of Education.
Yeah, and she's that vote's going to occur just before somebody else addresses Congress jointly. I think Donald Trump's going to do his first speech as the new president.
Very nice timing. Thank you for catching that, Hans. All right, it is 6:24 WMAL, traffic and weather.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is 6:37, News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We are grooving you into this Friday morning. I'm Patrice Onwuka, your usual Friday gal. I'm in for Larry today. And alongside me is Hans von Spakovsky of the Heritage Foundation. You're grooving into Friday with me, right, Hans?
I am in the end of the first month of what I can think is the best first month of a presidency in the whole time I've been in Washington.
Amen. I second that. Well, at 7:05, we've got Maine State Representative Laurel Libby. She's going to discuss the battle to protect women's sports in her state. At 7:35, Mike Litteris of the National Park Service has some intel on the peak bloom for cherry blossoms this year. And at 8:05, Alana Goodman of the Washington Free Beacon is going to join us to talk about what we are literally going to be talking about today and right now, which is the Epstein files. We were teased. We were given a big tease by Pam Bondi on Wednesday evening. She was on Jesse Waters' show, and she announced that something big was going to be coming on the Epstein files. Let's play cut 6, Michael.
You said last week that you have the Epstein files on your desk. When can we see them, and what's taking so long to release them?
I do. Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims. 200. So we have over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that, I think tomorrow, the personal information of victims. Other than that, I think tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office.
What kind? Are we going to see who was on the flights? Are we going to see any evidence from what he recorded, because he had all of his homes wired with recording devices?
Yeah, what you're going to see, hopefully tomorrow, is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information. But it's pretty sick what that man did.
Okay, well,
along with his co-defendant.
Absolutely, and he had help. That's for sure.
He sure did.
Okay, so that was Wednesday evening. That was Pam Bondi, Attorney General, telling Jesse Waters on Fox News that, Hans, we were going to see the receipts. We were going to see the flight logs. We were going to see the names, big names, any types of names that were involved with Jeffrey Epstein and his sick, twisted human trafficking of people, including children. That was what we were expecting. What we got yesterday was, frankly, a dud. It was literally just a number of names, and this was leaked out to a lot of conservative social media influencers, but a lot of information that had already come out, names that had we'd already known about. And so it seems like there are some FBI agents who are holding hostage the real dirt, holding hostage all of the information that Pam Bondi suggested would come out. What is your initial response to that story, Hans?
Well, I don't understand what's going on. Look, the rules with regard to the Justice Department and criminal investigation is that, look, while the investigation is going on, while the prosecution is going on, yeah, they can withhold all of their files and evidence because otherwise it could compromise the prosecution. But once the case is over, and the Epstein case, it's over. It died with Epstein. Everything in their files becomes subject to public disclosure, with the exception of things like grand jury proceedings. If there's a national security concern, they can protect confidential informants, and they can protect the IDs, for example, of victims. But everything else, it's subject to public disclosure. And this stuff should have come out a long time ago. There's just been no reason for the Justice Department and the FBI to keep hanging on to all of these materials.
Absolutely, 100%. So Pram Bondi ordered the new FBI director, Kash Patel, to investigate why their orders to hand over these documents are being refused by lower-level staffers.
Right.
So that is who is holding these documents hostage. Lower-level employees in the FBI. Kash Patel said on social media, the FBI is entering a new era, one that will be defined by integrity, accountability, and the unwavering pursuit of support. There will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, and no stone left unturned. And anyone from the prior or current Bureau who undermines this will be swiftly pursued and brought to justice. So what did we get out of what was released? Well, apparently 341 pages were posted to the DOJ website for public review. 236 of them were flight logs. 95 included redacted contact information, and 7 pages featured a masseuse list, and 3 pages were listed as evidence. And again, apparently a lot of these, what was released yesterday, are names, information that we already knew, that had already been released. We do know from previous reporting that Jeffrey Epstein's contact list, and this is a cover story here, included Alec Baldwin, Michael Jackson, Mick Jagger, and RFK Jr.'s mother. So we'll see what else who else is going to be included. I see some other names here that are names that have already been on these previous lists. So you've got both Kash Patel and Pam Bondi telling their underlings at the FBI they need to release this, and apparently it's the New York office that's the holdout. What's going to happen here, Hans?
Well, see, this problem illustrates the problems that Kash Patel is facing. Look, he just started in that job. He's got a huge organization under him, and rooting out the insubordination, the resistance is going to take quite a while, and it's going to take a lot of work. And this is evidence of the problem inside the FBI.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be more on this. We've got a good guest coming up, Alana Goodman at the Washington Free Beacon, who will give us more details and more. But stay with us. It's 6:44. What an appropriate song for our next story here. Big congratulations to a local WMAL hero. Hung Kao is the new Undersecretary of the Navy. This was just announced. President Trump said, "I'm pleased to announce that Hung Kao will be our next U.S. Undersecretary of the Navy. He is the embodiment of the American dream. He worked tirelessly to make proud the country that gave his family a home. He went to the amazing U.S. Naval Academy, earned his master's degree in physics. He served in combat as a special operations officer for 25 years. His experience, both in combat and in the Pentagon, will get him the job done. Congratulations." That's what President Trump wrote. This is another great pick by President Trump. We saw Hung Kao really fight and represent so many interests over the past few years, and really step forward and take on a significant leadership role. And here he is now as the new nominated as the Undersecretary. What are your thoughts, Hans?
Well, I can't think of a more appropriate job for him. And, it also shows, again, once again, the difference between this administration and the prior administration. They're putting in a Navy veteran. You know, the prior administration put all these social activist civilians into roles inside DOD because their view wasn't that the military, the number one goal should be warfighting ability and defending the U.S., but it should be used for social change. And thank goodness the leadership being put in, folks like Hung Kao, are going to change that back to what DOD and the military is supposed to do, is make sure we are defended.
Yes. And strong and respected on the international stage and feared. Let me put that in there. I think world powers should fear us. And so Hung Kao's response to President Trump's social media post was, "Thank you, Mr. President. It's time to get to work." I think that's indicative of someone who's ready to get the job done, not grandstand, not make this about him and his personal causes and personal beliefs, but really about making sure that that our country is on strong footing and is well represented and well feared. All right, it is 6:51 WMAL O'Connor and Company.